Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from October 16th to the 22nd. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. Try to think of my channel as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the U.S. cannabis industry, identify top U.S. MSOs that you keep seeing week after week that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now based on their current market cap, and take advantage whenever you feel ready, if you wish to do so, of course, pending whatever incremental reform we're supposed to get from now until whenever Schedule 3 announcement. And so I believe when that flip switches, a lot of wealth is going to be created again, as it has been in the past, and I've seen it. Therefore, I figure it's best to learn how to take advantage so that you can help yourself, your family, and your community. But again, this is not advice, just perspective from someone like myself who's been watching this industry for a while and has skin in the game. So with that, first story from Cy Scott. Thank you for sharing this. As new Headset.io industry report highlights the success Missouri is having already. As they launched adult use in February, remember, it has quickly become the 6th largest market among headsets tracked markets in the U.S. already. So that's hella impressive. And so this comes with a report, which I will show you. Of course, you can grab the report if you'd like, a few comments for perspective. But main thing is that I'm not going to spend too much time, but I will just invite you to pause to read. Otherwise, links are in the comments. So this is, again, about Missouri's market, intro and methodology. Key takeaways, definitely some good points here if you want to pause to read for those. Sales growth, the image that we just saw there, essentially highlighting the same stats and figures. Pause to read. Then I'll bring you down to product categories. Pause to read. Then for this bit, if you're interested, and then brand and product count, you can pause to read. So love to see Missouri on fire, though, and this is another blueprint on how states can do it right. Top products, you can pause to read from flower to pre-rolls, and then concentrates, vapor pens down to concentrates, from February 2023 to September 2023. And then plenty more. We got pricing, if you wanted to pause to read that one. Discounting, if you wanted to pause to read that one. And then conclusion. Otherwise, the full link is in the comments if you wanted to go through that. But love getting this new data, highlighting the state-led growth story is still very real. Well, we got this one from Anthony Varel. Average annual revenue per store is now at a run rate of north of $10 million per year. And this comes from Pablo Zuanic, former analyst with, I think, Canaccord Ingenuity, does his own thing now. Regardless, though, this is in reference to Maryland, another state that recently launched for adult use, I believe, as of July 1st, and it is on fire. And so, again, great comment here. Most likely why TerraSend raised guidance, because they're going to make more money than they expected. But shouldn't be too hard to figure out. The incremental growth is coming to the earnings prints from Maryland operations. And so we'll see that in Q3 and Q4. Mostly from the MSOs that have the largest footprint in Maryland, obviously, but we love to see that. Now, the only thing is I didn't find the raw data for Maryland's recent sales, and so if you happen to have access to a report or some recent new numbers, please let me know in the comments, but I'll also put them there if I find anything from now until I post the story. But with that, I thought this was a big story, just to jump off of what we shared last week, as a lot of people are talking about this, and sure enough, we are actually seeing some action finally taken from the Securities and Exchange Commission. And so from the Dales report, thank you for summarizing this, because it's a complicated issue and you do a better job than I could, but they deems it appropriate that cease and desist proceedings be hereby are instituted. Consequences for questionable trading practice for the notorious cannabis Zenabis, Tilray, Afria back in the day, short sellers have apparently come due. And so what does this actually mean? Again, I don't know, but I invite you to pause to read. Now, I find this interesting as Anson Advisors is registered with the Ontario Securities Commission. Where the hell are they in doing any of their job? Like, I mean, sure, naked short selling might be legal in Canada, hence why they're useless and not doing anything. But it's like, why does the SEC have to eventually step in and be the adult in the situation, right? As a portfolio manager and exempt market dealer, and as an exempt reporting advisor with the SEC. And so it seems like some action might be taken against them, and so just wanted to share this all for what it's worth. Explain it like I'm five. Cease and desist proceedings against Anson Advisors are coming. Anson is an alleged short seller of cannabis stocks, particularly of Canadian LPs, stretching back several years ago. And so it's just nice to see some accountability finally. And so this is, of course, the court case. If you're interested, all these links will be in the comments as well. But main thing just to point out is if we look at shortdata.ca, we can check this week over week to see whether shorts are still active and doing what they've been doing for a long time. If we click largest short positions, CSE. And while it is annoying that we only get delayed reporting that comes out twice a month on the 15th and 30th, we can check the site and see that the shorts have been up to the same old shenanigans, at least up until the 15th of October. And so I think it's reassuring that the announcement from the SEC came out yesterday, and so we'll see what effects this has next week. But all that to point out is I'm not too concerned about the selling pressure, because I think it's more of just the same old stuff as opposed to retail really selling, because retail is blind to what could potentially come in the next 24 months. And so all that to say is I want to share that I did buy more Air Wellness this past week. I think Wednesday morning I set a bid at $245 because I was happy with that if it can open down and I can get some shares there. Sure enough, I did. I could have waited until Friday. Of course, hindsight's 2020. You live and you learn. But all that to point out, I'm very happy now to increase my share count to 2,395, get my average price down to 323 Canadian dollars at this book value. And I will probably try to send a little bit more when I get paid again in November. But at that point, I think I'm going to pause just because I have some other plans that I want to put some money towards. But did want to share because, again, honesty and transparency is one of my rules. And just to show you that I did buy because there's blood in the streets, and that is theoretically the best time. But with that, happy Cannabis Legalization Day, Canada. It's crazy to think that October 17th, 2018 was when we legalized. But of course, ending cannabis prohibition has spoken for itself in Canada, and the benefits certainly outweigh the negatives in any sort of way. And so this was Tuesday, the 17th of October. Interestingly enough, some data points from the reports that I shared at the end of last week's video. And while I do have to caution, because the only smart thing the Canadian government has done in the last decade is actually legalize cannabis, since then they've really turned full communist and Marxist, and we cannot really trust any numbers because wouldn't be surprised if they're fudging it. And so I just have to put that disclaimer out here first, mainly to highlight that 70% might not be accurate, but as a Canadian who sees like 2 or 3 pot shops across the street from me, they're all over the place, you know that having these legal outlets has put a large dent in the black market, and we can check the sales data month over month to verify that. And so I don't know if 70% is accurate, but hey, this is the source. So for a closer look, of course, you can pause to read. Otherwise, the source will be in the comments if you're interested. Well, we got another one from Mark Landers. Imagine the savings in police, court, and prison resources. And so again, just have to caution that, but it speaks for itself. Before legalization, cannabis possession was almost always illegal and accounted for the majority of cannabis-related plant offenses. After legalization, total cannabis-related offenses fell overall, and now most offenses are related to illicit importation and exportation. And so 81% in 2016, down to 67% of arrests in general. As always, the source is in the comments to check that out further. But lastly, just to contrast the data we're getting out of Canada, yeah, no shit, every state in the US is essentially seeing the same thing. But just to highlight the first state that did it, Colorado, with a population of less than 6 million people, that's 15 billion taken away from the illegal market in the last decade. Who wouldn't want that unless you're a politician, CEO, or person in power that is incentivized to look the other way so that you can protect your corporate interests, right? So you can't say any of these people really give a fuck about public health or saving lives. And now we can finally call them out on that bullshit because we got all the data. But with that, from JD Supra Law publication talking about the SAFER Act and how or why cannabis may soon become a bigger deal. Lots here, and it's kind of dry, but I'll bring you through it just because there are some points that they make. Cannabis gains momentum at federal and state levels. Pause to read if you're interested. And again, we'll know more about Florida November 8th. Can't wait. Key provisions of the Safer Banking Act, in case you've missed any of the updates. The scope of the Safer Banking Act details payments, insurers, mortgage loans, forfeiture, hemp. Will financial institutions be required to serve the cannabis industry? Pause to read. Long story short, no, as institutions will not be required to serve the businesses. But of course, if it's easier to serve them and there's less compliance, then they may be incentivized to eventually get there sooner than later. The next point, a risk-based approach, how to prepare to work with a cannabis business. And while the current FinCEN guidance is based off of the old Cole memo, can we get a Garland memo 2.0 at the same time we get that Schedule 3 announcement? That would obviously be the best case scenario, but the main thing is that right now it does not look like the FinCEN guidance will allow for uplisting based on what I see here. Again, I don't know, I'm not an expert or a lawyer, but let me know in the comments if you know otherwise. Mind you, after all that said, they still seem somewhat optimistic. Big deals ahead, and so full link in the comments again if you want to go through that. But with that, from Jesse Redmond, again, just to share with you, thank you, Jesse, as here's the Congressional Calendar for October and November. Yellow is when both chambers is in session, blue is Senate only, and white is yet another vacation. So we hope to see a Senate floor vote on safer banking before Thanksgiving week, but with everything going on, who knows? And at the same time, while we were told that there might be a 90-day period or we can expect an announcement by December 2nd, we don't necessarily know how true that is. And so while we're hopeful to hear some sort of Schedule 3 announcement or rescheduling to Schedule 3 announcement from now until the end of the year, it's just hard to definitively say that we will. We're all hopeful that we will. I'm planning accordingly in case we will. If we don't, it'll give me more time to average down, but ultimately just wanted to share that because as much as we have that rough timeline, we don't know how certain and set in stone it actually is. Because if the Biden admin doesn't follow the timeline, who's going to hold them accountable, right? And so with that from MJ Biz Daily, what the end of 280E might mean for cannabis business taxes. I mean, we know this very well. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we'll bring you down at least to the law firm that was interviewed for this article is advising the cannabis industry of several key tax implications of rescheduling. Past taxes paid under 280E are unlikely to be refunded, and so nice try, Trulieve. Still think they have a case, so good luck, Kim, and I hope you can make a bang with what you're fighting for. While secondly, unpaid past taxes due under 280E would probably still be owed, of course. While lastly, if rescheduling is completed sometime in 2024, hoping the announcement comes before that year begins, it's possible that 280E taxation on the cannabis industry could end retroactive to Jan 1st, 2024. And so it seems like if the announcement is made and then it gets implemented in 2024, Jan 1, 2024 is when they can officially act like any other business in the U.S. that's not discriminated against, right? And so absolute horseshit, it's wild, and just reiterating the situation. Under 280E, state legal cannabis companies paid more than $1.8 billion in excess taxes compared to non-cannabis businesses in 2022. How unconstitutional. And so obviously there's a lot more to the story if you wanted to grab the link in the comments, but just wanted to share the juice of it. Essentially, we don't know when. There's a lot of waiting, but it's supposed to happen at some point. And so with that from High Times, a study as legal pot retailers not linked to rise in crime. No shit. What do you know? And that's essentially something or a conclusion I've come to as someone living in Canada and just realizing we don't have the robberies that sadly the US does because Congress will not pass SAFER. But newly published researcher punctures a tired old concern about cannabis legalization. So again, not going to spend too much time on this, but according to a study published this month in the Annals of Regional Science, the opening of a state-regulated cannabis dispensary has no significant impact on local crime in the average neighborhood. Yeah, no shit. In fact, it actually increases the value of the properties around that area, and you see opioid overdoses go down by 25%. How could you all not want that, right? So I don't know about you, but I think it's time for Americans to unite and make a lot of fucking noise so that we can get rid of that stupid federal overhang once and for all. And so scrolling down for a little bit more, if you wanted to pause to read, otherwise, full link in the comments to go through that. Well, we got another study from the future. Love when this happens, December 2023. But from Science Direct, anxiety severity and prescription medication utilization in first-time medical cannabis users. What did we find? So just read the highlights and invite you to grab the link in the comments if you want to go through the rest. But we know anxiety and PTSD are qualifying conditions for medical cannabis in Pennsylvania. The study sample included individuals with these qualifying psychiatric conditions. Participants displayed reduced anxiety at month 3 post-MM treatment initiation. They also reported reductions in medication use, particularly for benzodiazepines. Big Pharma must not like that, right? And we see that yet again, and people want to say, oh, Big Pharma doesn't give a shit. Yeah, no, they don't want to lose their market share. They give a shit. While lastly, results speak for themselves, much like other studies, and support the use of medical cannabis as a treatment for anxiety and PTSD. Try telling us something we don't already know, Science Direct. And so, of course, scroll down if you wanted to read the methods, results, and conclusion. Otherwise, full link in the comments. But with that, got this press release from Tilray as they're taking part in a study. And so just happy to share this as well because it's really only the MSOs really putting their money where their mouth is and having to back this up because cannabis is still stuck in the Schedule 1 where it never belonged in the first place. Tilray Medical supports new clinical trial in Spain, I believe, to study medical cannabis in glioblastoma cancer treatment. And so a little bit on this. Basically, the clinical trial will be conducted in Spain, recruiting 30 patients from 8 specialized neuro-oncology medical sites. Again, very small sample size, likely because of regulations, unfortunately, in partnership with renowned scientists from the Spanish Research Group of Neuro-Oncology and the Complutense University of Madrid, with Tilray Medical providing the pharmaceutical-grade medical cannabis for the trial for administration to patients. It's funded by the Medical Cannabis Bike Tour Foundation charity and is scheduled to commence at University Hospital 12 de Octubre on September 5th, 2023. And so more about this study if you're interested, but I do look forward to finding the results in the future and hopefully sharing those with you as well. More info in the comments if you're interested. But with that, some state news as Colorado cannabis retailers get this. Again, reiterating what we're seeing in Canada and Colorado, have 99% compliance rate in underage sales checks, state regulators say. So take that again, prohibitionists who try to think that youth use is going to increase or that it gets easier for youth to access cannabis when they need an ID and they need to be of age to actually purchase it from a legal shop. Right? The legal shops aren't incentivized to sell it to anybody for a profit. And so, hence why they have a 99% compliance rate. And you can assume that most states are likely at this level, but just highlighting the preposterousness of prohibitionist argument. Colorado cannabis regulators announced this week that out of 285 underage sales checks conducted at state licensed cannabis stores, there have been only 4 failures, a compliance rate of about 99%. A legal market obviously beats the gray market. While any failure is unacceptable, said the Colorado Department of Revenue Cannabis Enforcement Division, yada yada, said in the last issue of its quarterly In the Weeds newsletter on Monday, we're pleased to report this very high compliance rate, which is on par with the compliance percentage from 2022. And I would love to know how compliant other states are. But again, this is just what you get when you end cannabis prohibition and have the legal market. You cannot make this shit up. And so more on this in the comments, of course, if you want to go through it. Well, we've got this one out of Cali, and great catch, Chompsy. So thanks for sharing your perspective. As this new law says that if the federal government reschedules any Schedule 1 drug, talk about foreshadowing, California health professionals will automatically be able to legally prescribe and dispense it. This is massive, especially when you remember how big California is, the 5th largest GDP in the world. And so just to verify for marijuana moment, as California governor signs last remaining cannabis bills of the legislative session to help ease the pain and struggles that really only the legal industry is facing because of Gavin Newsom's ridiculously high taxes and because of the discrimination, from the federal government and all the politicians and regulators. But all that to say, long story short, pause to read if you're interested. But here are the 3 latest bills Newsom signed into law, which his office announced late last week. This first one from Mike McGuire. Pause to read these 2 if you're interested. But the main thing is that there was another bunch of bills, reform bills that went into law with his signature. You can pause to read this section if you like. But the main one I wanted to bring you to verifies what Chompsy said. Now, they also add here, which I think is hilarious. The publication called Marijuana Moment tries to deflect that this isn't a big win for cannabis. This could be especially relevant to the psychedelics psilocybin and MDMA, which have been designated as breakthrough therapies by the Federal Food and Drug Administration and are expected to be approved for medical use as early as next year. It's not like cannabis is expected to be rescheduled to Schedule 3. You might want to fucking mention that, Tom. My God. This guy gets less likable and likable as the days go on, unfortunately. And so with that, out of Florida, Office of Medical Cannabis Use for this past week, we can see new dispensaries approved from October 16th to the 20th. We've got Cookies, Florida in Miami. GTI, Rise Dispensaries, a new one in Sun Center City. And then True Leaf opening a new location in Apollo Beach. So if we scroll up to check out the qualified patient count for this past week, the qualified patient count did increase to 853,986, which represents a smaller jump week over week of just 836. Not ideal to see that, but slowly but surely more and more Floridians are turning to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative, which we love to see, and more will likely eventually turn to that as well. And so looking at the dispensations from October 13th to the 19th, so all the active MSOs in the state, the number of active dispensaries that they have, and then for this past week alone, number of milligrams of THC sold, the number in milligrams of CBD sold, and the number in ounces of smokable flower sold. And so strong sales, looks like it across the board. As always, thank you connoisseurs.io for your updated visual market share comp sheet, as it's an easier way to take in said same information. And so with that, looking at the visuals, total flower sales, ounces by company for this past week, you can pause to read. Total THC sales in milligrams this past week by company. Total CBD sales, pause to read if you're interested. And then total dispensary locations, of course, we know True Leaf leads that one by a mile. Verano close second, Air Wellness in third. And so with that, one more from Florida. Thank you, Colin Farian, for sharing this one. Figured it would be worthwhile as our price is rising in Florida cannabis. We know that for a long time, the companies were very competitive and they were only heading down, but observations are only anecdotal. But if so, this could reflect the bottom of the price wars, which would be huge and does sort of give us a bit more perspective of where we could be heading based on where we've been. If not, operators are trying to match quality with prices. But the good news is that overall it seems like select flowers up 30% for True Leaf, and Rosens are up 20% for Air Wellness. Flowery vape, flower up 15%. And so I'd say that's better to see than not that prices are actually increasing in Florida and hopefully other markets as well. Well, we got this one out of Ohio. Just to get an update, we're going to find out on November 7th what the actual results are. But another poll highlighting that more than not, the majority, 57%, support cannabis legalization among Ohio likely voters, and that includes a majority of Republicans. And so, read it and weep. Of course, we'll only know, and it's only worthwhile updating you on November 7th, but we look forward to having these results and then finding out about Florida the day after. But with that, another one from New Hampshire. Uniqueness of New Hampshire's proposed state-run cannabis stores could create federal liability. AG's office says, yeah, no shit. That's why it's so interesting that New Hampshire wants to go this route because New Hampshire's not going to want to pay $280 to the federal government. No shit, right? So this is what makes the whole proposal from New Hampshire so interesting in the first place, while the other argument basically tells us why we don't want another New York. Because any state-controlled or state-managed system certainly creates more liabilities than assets. There's no doubt about that. And New York has been the perfect example of attempting socialist top-down policy that creates social equity, equal outcomes for everybody, therefore no private citizens get a chance in the industry in the long run. At least until we get those communists out. But with that last one out of states, as Virginia election next month could set stage for legal cannabis sales or a rollback of reform depending on which party wins. Now, while we were hopeful based on Virginia a few years ago legalizing, they did not launch a commercial market. So we've seen a prime example in Virginia where cannabis becomes legal, but the black market and organized crime can run rampant because they go, yeah, let's just not create a commercial market to create jobs, collect taxes, and provide all the benefits we're seeing in Canada, Colorado, and all these other legal states. And so this election is scheduled for November 7th as well, on the same day as Ohio's, and so hopefully I will have an update for you around then. But with that, weekly cannabis update by Roth. Thank you, Dennis Ruda, for sharing this. Now, he shared this on October 16th, which is Monday, so just telling you that this is a little bit old, and then clicking on it, it actually comes from last week. And so think of this essentially as an update from last week. If you missed my last week's video, pause to read it if you're interested. Basically what Roth has to say. And then MSO benchmark scoring update, key takeaways, best-in-class margin structures, scorecard methodology reminder. But the good thing is we get some updated data points, and so this is at least interesting to take a look at if you'd like. So again, link in the comments, looking at current MSO scorecard quarter-over-quarter changes, and then overall takeaways with a bit more adjusted, or 280 adjusted score, and then capital markets update equalization theme. And then so with that, on to some MSO news, as Trulieve Cannabis Corp to hold their third quarter 2023 results on November 29th, 2023, before the market opens. And so looking forward to this, and hopefully they might benefit from some of the new states that have recently launched. With that, Cresco Labs unlocks $32 million in non-dilutive capital by selling an asset and then earning interest off of another asset they own. So hey, at least they've gotten some money back and it didn't cost them much, but supports year of the core focus and enhances balance sheet. As happy to report that Cresco announced the closing of the sale of its sole licensed Arizona operation in Cato to an affiliate of Mint Cannabis for an aggregate purchase price of $6.5 million in cash. In addition, the company has closed on a conventional mortgage on its Ellenville, New York properties for a principal amount of up to $25.3 million with an interest rate of 8.43%. So that'll be nice to receive that over the next little while from whoever ends up using these locations. The terms of each deal is down here if you're interested. Otherwise, pause to read. Otherwise, full link is in the comments. With that, from Green Thumb, as Swift and Sweet discover Incredibles fast new acting edibles, seems Green Thumb has launched a new brand, Pineapple Express gummy. So Illinois is getting these new gummies as of Friday, October 27th. And so with that, Verano graduates public listings to Cboe Canada, which makes Verano officially the largest corporate issuer on the Cboe Canada exchange with a market cap exceeding 2 billion Canadian dollars. And so according to Verano, Cboe Canada, which is part of a global network of exchanges across 26 marketplaces, is an intentional and strategic decision. Again, according to Verano, they believe that this move positions Verano for continued growth and expansion as they evolve in tandem with the rapidly changing industry. We see this as a winning combination for Verano and our shareholders. And so I do wonder if there's a website where you can check short data for Cboe Canada, similar to the CSE, but I don't believe it's something that you can do with this site here. So I'll do some digging later, but all that to point out more details here if you're interested. Pause to read, or you can grab the link in the comments. But with that, some other stories from the week or some other resources that might be worth checking out. This one from the Dales Report, an interview with Verano. Was great to be at the Cboe in Toronto yesterday with the Verano Brands team. So it seems like the Dales Report went with them for their official switch over to the Cboe Canada, and you can listen to that if you're interested. The link will be in the comments. Well, this is an update from Jungle Java, a long-winded answer to a question from someone named Jason Ballin. Are these after-hour block trades new? Historically, the cash from inflows would get deployed in the following days, and the underlyings would see meaningful appreciation. And so, obviously, people getting curious about what the fuck is going on with MSOS. Who knows, really? But Jungle Java trying to address his question there with a decent answer from, I read through it and I thought it made sense. So to learn more about how MSOS works, I would recommend reading this. But main thing I just want to reiterate as someone that invests directly in the companies that I think will be winners, because I don't like fees and ETFs, I'm always going to advise for investing directly in who you think will be the winners versus losing fees and time to any possible shenanigans. Again, I'm not saying they're shenanigans. I don't really know, but just sharing what Jungle Java has to say. And then on top of that, it seems like Sammy J is trying to add some more insight on how MSOS works, and in the sense that MSOS is not trying to handicap the cannabis industry. So again, if any of you are following this or interested in how this works and want to learn more, quite a bit added in here if you're interested, but the full link will be in the comments. And then so with that, from Jesse Redmond, I believe this is another episode of the Higher Exchanges, that new show that they do. Now, they spoke with Jason G. Wild of TerraSend, Ziad Ghanem, who I believe might be their CEO or CFO, someone involved in there, and then Keith Stauffer of TerraSend Corp. Okay, so he's the CFO. Ziad's likely the CEO, as Jason Wild is the executive chairman. All that to say, links are available. I'll put the link in the comment down below for the podcast. But figured I would share this. Here is the revenue growth slide that Morgan Paxia mentions early in the episode. Sector leading 2023 year-over-year revenue growth. Sorry for that tongue twister. But so far as of right now, it seems, I don't know when this timeline was taken or what the cutoff date is, but TerraSend 28%, Ascend Wellness 22%, Verano 8%, Air 6%, Cureleaf 2%, Columbia Care 2%, Green Thumb, Jushi, TrueLeaf, and then Cresco. Unfortunate for these companies that tried to bite off more than they can chew at some points. But again, in time, a rising tide will lift all ships, and that rescheduling announcement is going to be a big fucking deal for everybody. You best believe it when it happens. And so with that, out of Germany, we got an update from Marijuana Moment. German lawmakers hold first debate on cannabis legalization bill. This is this bill. We are describing a new path, a courageous path, a path that stands on the side of those who consume it. Well, thankfully, that means you're standing for humanity, as opposed to corrupt clowns or prohibitionists that, again, are paid to believe or look the other way. And so not much of an update, just besides holding the first debate. So I will put this link in the comments if you're interested. But nice to see Germany finally, getting back to work, as opposed to shafting their own German citizens by focusing on a tragic historical conflict that has sadly been reignited somewhere else in the world. And so with that, though, we did have this interview from YouTube, Benzinga and Dale's report, I believe, as well. Germany marches toward legalization. And so I will admit I have not listened to this yet, but I do want to listen to this one because I don't know as much about Germany as I do, some of the US MSOs and some of the other situations going on. Now, I will admit, though, I forgot to mention it before. I have not listened to the podcast with Jason G. Wild, and I have not listened to the Higher Spaces as well. And so just wanted to share that. But another resource if you're interested to learn about Germany. While on top of that, an update out of Europe, as apparently Denmark's medical cannabis pilot program has seen 90% growth over the last year as of October 18th. And so, hey, that's promising. At some point, we'd love to see one European nation stop these pilot programs and have a pair of balls and just launch a commercial market. Hopefully, that'll be Germany with phase 2 sooner than later. But you can pause to read if you're interested. As Denmark's medical cannabis access schemes, there's the magistral scheme if you're interested. Pause to read. The pilot program, if you'd like to pause to read. And pharmaceutical scheme, if you'd like to pause to read. And while the numbers continue to shift, main takeaway is that it's growing 90% year over year, and more people want cannabis as opposed to less. And so I think that's the main takeaway. Otherwise, you can grab the link in the comments. While we've got this one from Northern Ireland, pharmaceutical manufacturer media. Weird. Northern Ireland's first medical cannabis facility to open in 2024. Love to see that, as more European countries are becoming cannabis friendly. And apparently the UK's leading medical cannabis clinic is at the forefront of this industry growth, with its patient numbers up 700% in 2023 alone. So the business is now set to hire 200 new employees over the next 2 years to keep up with patient demand and forecasted growth. The benefits of ending cannabis prohibition, right? And so all that to point out, it seems like the first factory for growing cannabis will come to Ireland in 2024, and they're expecting a lot of gains from that as well. So more here if you wanted to pause to read. While another update out of Colombia, we keep hearing Colombia shit on the US and saying that they're going to end cannabis prohibition, yet they never do. So this talk is cheap, man. But for Marijuana Moment, after smelling legal cannabis in New York, Colombian president denounces enormous hypocrisy of US-led drug war. And it's like, yeah, cool story, bro, but we've had enough talk from you. We need action. We need you to pass legislation that ends prohibition and says fuck you to that 1961 single UN drug convention that unfortunately is preventing a lot of countries from passing their own drug legislation. Most people don't even know about that, but that is one of the costliest mistakes put in play a long, long time ago by the racist Harry J. Anslinger, whose job was essentially to make cannabis prohibited worldwide, sadly. And so, unveiling Colombia's new national drug policy recently, though, their president Gustavo Petro said this: "Marijuana is sold today in Times Square," Petro said, according to a translation of his speech. "It smelt on all the streets, all the way around the corner, and they sold it like any other product." Now get this, clearly highlighting that he has no idea what he's talking about, and whoever informed him was clearly wrong and has no idea what the reality is of the situation is. I suppose they charge taxes, and that New York City, or the state of New York, lives partially from the taxes from legal cannabis? You cannot make this shit up. I mean, what was the taxes they brought in last month? Like $18 million from the, 20 legal stores compared to the 8,000 illicit ones that don't have to pay tax because you're incentivized to be a criminal as opposed to join the legal industry because of the socialists in charge that only want to collect their paycheck and give everyone equal outcomes, no chance at the industry. That is New York. And so obviously he has some wrong ideas of what's happening, but get this. The plan seeks to cut the country's cocaine production by nearly half, 43%, mitigate environmental impacts of illicit drug production and trafficking, minimize violence caused by the drug trade and its criminal enforcement, and promote the inclusion, social protection, here's the social justice words, and care of people who use drugs, according to a description from the office. It's like, okay, fascinating. Has nothing to do with cannabis, though, so we dig a little bit deeper, but part of the approach will include advancing legalization and regulation of adult-use cannabis and non-psychoactive uses of the coca leaf. Well, we're waiting on this legislation. How about passing it? Well, lawmakers in August gave preliminary approval to a cannabis legalization bill as part of the 2-year process of enacting reform. Hey, prior version stalled in the Senate last session, and so what makes you think that this version is going to make it through this time, right? Let me know in the comments, but at least they're talking about it. We just need more action. And so with that, Q2 financial review of the Big 5 MSOs featuring Nick Gastovich, aka Canvestments. Cannabis Investing Network is back. I did not listen to this one, but Q2 review of the Big 5 MSOs. So, of course, the link is in the comments if you want to go through this one. I find these are always very informative. And while I have not listened to this one yet, my priorities for today is to listen to this one and then the interview with Trade to Black and Benzinga about the Germany update. And then lastly, wanted to share this timely quote from a legendary investor, Stan Druckenmiller. So thank you, Lawrence McDonald, for sharing this. Remember, never, ever invest in the present. It doesn't matter what a company is earning, what they have earned. You must visualize the situation 18 months from now. And whatever that is, that's where the price will be, not where it is today. Point being is that the time to buy cannabis stocks was never February 2021, even though that was right after the Dems flipped the Senate, and had the Dems kept their campaign promises, like honest individuals with integrity, they could have done their job and given this industry the chance that they needed a long time ago, ending the discrimination and letting them be off to the races. The reality is, the best time to buy them was March 2020, when no one wanted to buy anything because no one had cash and there was so much blood in the streets and so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so, what does that tell you? Based on what we can expect in the future, possibly with catalysts, the best time should have been to be buying before August 30th or at any point in time when we see more red than green. But hey, I'm just thinking out loud. This is not advice. Let me know what you think in the comments about this quote and if it's relative to the cannabis industry. And do let me know if there's any other industry besides cannabis that looks as good as this, because I'm just not aware of them and I'd like you to comment so that I can know about them. But ultimately, I think this screams cannabis. It's just worth reiterating that if we don't get a positive announcement from the DEA based on the simple recommendation from the HHS, which is actually based in accurate cannabis science for once, based on all the evidence and studies I've shown in my videos and all the evidence and data that's out there for anyone to pull. If the DEA were to say no, that just highlights that there's way more cause for concern, as the corruption might be too rampant in certain U.S. agencies to even be course corrected. Now, again, I don't want to scare people because I do think that we're going to get a positive announcement on November 7th out of Ohio, and I think we're going to get a positive ruling on November 8th out of Florida, because this is America. And if those rulings do go for Americans, I think that increases the odds that the DEA will do, as they should, the right thing and right this past wrong.